And I gave her the biggest hug that I could. And when she saw me, she's like, "Oh man, finally somebody I see that's on my side."
Right, they can relate.
She was getting hit with everything left and right, and I just said, I hugged her. I said, "I'm so proud of you."
Welcome back to the Clark Update. Today, we're taking a closer look at a story that has generated intense discussion around Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and the broader WNBA conversation. Claims circulating online have raised serious questions about Clark's treatment on the court, the league's competitive culture, and whether some incidents were simply part of a physical sport, or evidence of something more deliberate. Before we go any further, there is an important distinction to make. Some of the most dramatic claims surrounding this story have not been independently verified. There is no established evidence proving that a secret league-wide operation called Operation Balance existed, and statements attributed to insiders or players should not automatically be treated as confirmed facts. With that in mind, let's separate the allegations from what can actually be established. The story begins with an emotional moment involving basketball legend Cheryl Miller and Caitlin Clark. A simple embrace between two prominent figures quickly became the subject of intense online interpretation. To some fans, the moment represented support for a young player facing extraordinary pressure. To others, it became symbolic of a much larger argument about whether Clark received fair treatment during her transition into professional basketball. That distinction matters because Clark's rookie season was unlike almost anything the league had experienced before. She arrived with enormous popularity, record-breaking attention, and expectations that extended far beyond the basketball court. Every game became an event. Every foul became a debate. Every confrontation could become a viral clip within minutes. And that attention created a complicated environment. Clark was undeniably targeted physically at times. Like many elite guards, she faced aggressive defense, hard screens, contact around the basket, and opponents attempting to disrupt her rhythm. Some plays were ordinary examples of competitive basketball. Others generated legitimate criticism from fans, analysts, and players who believed the officials should have intervened differently. But this is where the online narrative takes a dramatic turn. According to claims circulating on social media, an alleged strategy known as Operation Balance was designed to prevent Clark from becoming too dominant or influential. The theory suggests that veteran players and, allegedly, people higher within the basketball establishment wanted to limit her exposure, tolerate excessive physicality, and isolate her from potential allies. It is an explosive allegation. But there is a major problem. Publicly available evidence does not establish that such an operation existed. There are no verified league documents publicly demonstrating a coordinated campaign against Clark. There is no confirmed evidence showing that officials were instructed to ignore fouls against her. And there is no reliable proof that multiple teams received secret instructions to undermine her. That doesn't mean every concern surrounding Clark's treatment should be dismissed. It means the difference between documented events and speculation is extremely important. One of the names repeatedly pulled into this discussion is Sophie Cunningham. Cunningham became a particularly recognizable figure in conversations about Clark because of her physical style of play and several memorable confrontations involving the Fever. Online posts have attributed statements and private conversations to Cunningham that supposedly reveal a coordinated plan. However, these claims need to be treated carefully unless they can be connected to a verified recording, transcript, direct statement, or credible reporting. A phrase allegedly connected to Cunningham has been interpreted by some as evidence that Phoenix players were preparing to send Clark a message. That interpretation has fueled the conspiracy narrative. But competitive basketball has always included language about sending messages, establishing physicality, protecting teammates, and making opponents uncomfortable. Such language can sound sinister when removed from context, yet it does not automatically prove a league-wide conspiracy. This is where the story becomes much more interesting than the rumor itself. Because there is a legitimate conversation to be had about Clark's treatment without inventing evidence. Clark entered the WNBA as one of the most heavily scrutinized rookies in league history. She was playing against experienced professionals who understood how to exploit weaknesses. Defenders knew she was a dangerous perimeter shooter and an exceptional passer. Making her work physically, denying her space, forcing her away from preferred spots, and disrupting her rhythm were all logical basketball strategies. At the same time, Clark's visibility meant every questionable collision received extraordinary attention. A hard foul involving an ordinary rookie might disappear from the news cycle within hours. A hard foul involving Clark could dominate social media for days. That difference in attention created an environment where statistics, video clips, referee decisions, and player comments were examined more intensely than ever. Some viral claims have attempted to use foul numbers as proof of intentional targeting. But statistics alone cannot establish intent. A player can draw a high number of fouls because she handles the ball frequently, attacks the basket, creates contact, or simply spends more possessions under defensive pressure. To prove coordinated targeting, analysts would need much more than one statistic. They would need reliable comparisons, consistent definitions, context for individual plays, and evidence connecting the numbers to a deliberate instruction. That evidence has not been publicly established. The same principle applies to claims about egregious fouls. A statistic can tell us how frequently certain plays occurred. It cannot, by itself, tell us why they happened. And that distinction is crucial. There is also another side of the story that often gets lost. Clark was not merely surviving a difficult rookie season. She was adapting rapidly, improving throughout the year, and becoming increasingly influential on the court. Her passing, three-point shooting, transition play, and ability to generate offense helped transform the Indiana Fever into one of the league's most watched teams. That success makes the conspiracy theory less convincing in one important respect. If the objective truly was to stop Clark's rise, the strategy clearly did not accomplish that. Her popularity continued to grow. Television audiences followed her games. Merchandise and media attention surged. Her rivalry storylines became major talking points. Instead of disappearing from the spotlight, Clark became one of the central figures in the WNBA's expanding cultural reach. So where does that leave the controversy? It leaves us with two different stories. The first is supported by observable reality. Caitlin Clark faced enormous physical and competitive pressure during her rookie season. Some incidents were controversial, and fans had legitimate reasons to debate officiating and player behavior. The second is the much larger allegation that a coordinated league-wide campaign was deliberately designed to break Clark psychologically and suppress her career. That second story remains unproven. The emotional appeal of the theory is obvious. It provides a simple explanation for a complicated season. Every hard foul becomes part of a pattern. Every ignored whistle becomes evidence. Every uncomfortable interaction becomes another piece of a hidden puzzle. But real professional sports are rarely that simple. There are rivalries, personalities, competitive grudges, officiating mistakes, tactical decisions, media narratives, and individual moments all happening simultaneously. Turning those events into one centralized conspiracy requires evidence that goes beyond coincidence and interpretation. And that is why the role of Sophie Cunningham should be discussed carefully. Cunningham can be criticized for individual plays or comments if those events are supported by reliable evidence. But attributing a secret confession or private admission to her without verification risks turning speculation into supposed fact. The same applies to Cheryl Miller's embrace. It may have been meaningful. It may have represented encouragement. It may have reflected concern for a young player under enormous pressure. But there is no reliable basis for declaring that one hug exposed a secret league operation. Sometimes a moment is simply a moment. The larger issue, however, is absolutely worth discussing. Clark's arrival forced the WNBA to confront questions about physicality, officiating, media attention, veteran culture, and the enormous expectations placed on a player who became a global sports story almost overnight. Those conversations are real. So are the disagreements surrounding them. Fans can reasonably debate whether Clark received enough protection from officials. They can question whether certain fouls deserved harsher penalties. They can criticize players for unnecessary physicality. They can also argue that Clark, like every professional athlete, must learn to operate within an intensely competitive environment. None of those positions requires a secret operation. And perhaps that is the most important takeaway. The WNBA's growing spotlight means every controversy will become bigger, faster, and more emotional. Clips will go viral before context is available. Anonymous claims will spread alongside legitimate reporting. A dramatic headline can reach millions of people long before anyone verifies the underlying story. That makes critical thinking more important than ever. Caitlin Clark's story is already extraordinary without adding an unverified conspiracy to it. She entered the league under unprecedented attention, endured the normal, and sometimes controversial, physicality of professional basketball, faced established veterans, adapted to a new level of competition, and continued to build her reputation. Sophie Cunningham became part of that conversation because of her aggressive playing style and the moments that connected her to Clark's most discussed games. Cheryl Miller became part of it because a supportive gesture was interpreted as something larger. But interpretation is not proof. Until credible evidence demonstrates otherwise, Operation Balance should be regarded as an allegation circulating online, not an established WNBA operation. The real story may ultimately be less mysterious but more important. A young superstar entered a highly competitive league, became the center of unprecedented attention, and exposed every tension that comes with rapid change. And that conversation is far from over. As Clark's career continues, the most revealing evidence will not come from anonymous rumors or sensational headlines. It will come from the games themselves, verified statistics, credible reporting, and the words of the players and officials directly involved. So the next time a dramatic claim appears online, ask one simple question: what can actually be proven? Because when it comes to Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and the WNBA, the reality is already compelling enough. Referees allowed the contact to accumulate, critics repeated the same familiar arguments, and the online debate grew louder with every game. According to the theory surrounding Operation Balance, the ultimate objective was complete isolation. The idea was simple: if Caitlin Clark could be separated from support on the court, in the locker room, and in the media, the pressure might eventually become overwhelming. But that claim remains unverified. There is no established evidence proving that a coordinated league-wide operation existed. What is undeniable is that Clark faced extraordinary scrutiny, intense physical defense, and an unprecedented level of public attention. Then came a moment that supporters interpreted as a powerful symbol. When basketball legend Cheryl Miller showed Clark support, the gesture resonated far beyond the court. To Clark supporters, it represented something they believed had been missing: encouragement from someone who understood what it meant to carry enormous expectations into professional basketball. The embrace itself does not prove a conspiracy. But it did highlight an important question: what does genuine mentorship look like when a young athlete enters a league under extraordinary pressure? Miller's gesture reminded fans that support can matter just as much as criticism. A rookie does not simply need to be tested. She also needs guidance, encouragement, and people willing to help her navigate an unfamiliar environment. That is why the moment became so powerful online. For supporters who already believed Clark was being unfairly treated, the embrace appeared to break through months of frustration. It became a symbol of solidarity. And once that image spread, the conversation changed. Instead of focusing exclusively on individual fouls or controversial plays, fans began discussing the culture surrounding Clark. Was she receiving the same encouragement given to other young players? Were disagreements between veterans and rookies simply part of professional competition? Or had the intensity surrounding Clark created an environment where normal basketball tensions were being interpreted as something much larger? Those questions are legitimate. The problem begins when unanswered questions become established facts. Claims that Miller's support caused fear among veteran players or triggered coordinated attacks from media personalities require evidence. Without verified documentation, those conclusions remain speculation. What is clear is that the spotlight surrounding Clark became impossible to ignore. And that spotlight changed the dynamics of the league. As Clark's popularity grew, every controversial moment received enormous attention. A hard foul could become a national debate. A technical foul could dominate social media. A disagreement with an opponent could become a headline. The more attention she received, the more intense the reaction became. Supporters saw this as evidence that Clark was being singled out. Critics saw it as an inevitable consequence of becoming one of the most visible athletes in women's basketball. Both interpretations can exist without proving a secret plan. The theory of Operation Balance suggests that once direct physical pressure became harder to defend publicly, the strategy supposedly became subtler. Instead of obvious fouls, the alleged tactics included fewer touches, missed opportunities, questionable decisions, and moments where Clark appeared disconnected from the action. But basketball is full of mistakes. Teammates miss open players. Coaches change offensive systems. Players make bad decisions. Officials miss calls. Sometimes a star does not receive the ball when fans expect her to. A pattern can be frustrating without being coordinated. That distinction became increasingly important as internet communities began collecting clips from different games. Individual incidents were placed side by side, and viewers searched for similarities. Some saw a pattern. Others saw confirmation bias. The truth requires more than a compilation of controversial moments. To establish deliberate coordination, investigators would need reliable evidence connecting those incidents to a common instruction or policy. That evidence has not been publicly demonstrated. Still, something significant was happening. Clark refused to disappear. She kept playing. She kept shooting. She kept passing. She kept competing. And every time she responded to adversity with a strong performance, the public conversation became even louder. That may be the most interesting part of the entire story. Whether the challenges she faced were intentional or simply the natural difficulties of professional basketball, they did not prevent her from building momentum. Instead, adversity often became part of the story surrounding her. A difficult game became a comeback story. A controversial foul became a national discussion. A strong performance became another piece of evidence for supporters who believed Clark was capable of changing the sport. Her popularity grew alongside the controversy. That created an unexpected outcome. The more people argued about Clark, the more attention the WNBA received. A league that had once struggled to maintain mainstream sports coverage suddenly found itself at the center of enormous cultural conversations. And that raises a question far more significant than any individual foul. What happens when a new superstar arrives and changes the scale of attention around an entire league? Every established sports organization eventually faces this challenge. New stars emerge. Old hierarchies are tested. Fans become attached to different personalities. Media narratives evolve. Veterans defend their place while younger players attempt to establish themselves. That process can be uncomfortable. But discomfort is not necessarily conspiracy. Clark's rise has forced the WNBA to confront questions about its future, its audience, and the way it handles unprecedented attention. Her supporters want the league to embrace her popularity. Her critics want the conversation to remain focused on the entire collection of players rather than one superstar. Both perspectives are part of the debate. And perhaps the biggest mistake would be assuming that the league must choose between Clark and everyone else. The growth of one player does not have to diminish another. A rising superstar can bring attention to established veterans. Veteran stars can provide guidance to younger players. Rivalries can create compelling storylines. Competitive tension can make the sport more entertaining. The future does not have to be a battle between generations. That is where the symbolism of Miller's support becomes especially meaningful. Whether or not it had anything to do with the alleged Operation Balance, the gesture represented an idea that sports desperately need. The best players do not have to fear the success of those who come after them. Greatness can create more greatness. Mentorship can strengthen a league instead of weakening it. And competition does not require hostility. Caitlin Clark's story is therefore bigger than one rookie season and bigger than one controversial sequence of games. It is about what happens when a young athlete arrives with an enormous audience and forces an established sports culture to adapt. The WNBA can either treat that transformation as a threat or recognize it as an opportunity. But there is no need to turn every controversy into evidence of a hidden campaign. The strongest version of Clark's story does not require a conspiracy. It is already compelling. She entered professional basketball with immense expectations, faced experienced defenders, endured intense scrutiny, dealt with controversial officiating, navigated criticism from every direction, and continued to compete. Her supporters never stopped watching. Her critics never stopped debating. And the league continued to evolve around her. That is the real fault line. Not necessarily between Clark and the WNBA, but between an established sporting culture and a rapidly changing future. Millions of fans are watching that transformation unfold. They are asking whether the league will embrace its newest generation, how veterans will respond, and whether the sport can grow without losing the identity that made it successful. Those questions will not be answered by rumors. They will be answered over time. They will be answered by performances, attendance, television audiences, player relationships, league decisions, and the next generation of stars. And Caitlin Clark is already writing her part of that story. Game by game. Shot by shot. Headline by headline. Whether the league wanted this level of attention or not, the future of women's basketball is moving forward. The question now is not whether change is coming. It already has. The question is whether the WNBA will embrace that change and build something bigger with it, or spend its energy trying to resist it. When history looks back on this moment, that may be the story that matters most. Phase 2, according to the claims circulating online, was suppression of the media narrative. The theory suggests that once physical pressure failed to stop Caitlin Clark, the focus shifted toward controlling the spotlight around her. Her performances were allegedly downplayed, her biggest moments received less attention, and established WNBA narratives were supposedly pushed ahead of her accomplishments. But it is important to separate allegation from fact. There is no verified evidence establishing a league-wide plan to suppress Clark in the media. Criticism of her game, questions about her readiness, or comparisons with veteran players are not automatically proof of coordinated narrative control. Still, the perception was powerful. Clark entered professional basketball carrying enormous expectations. Because of her college success and massive following, every performance was analyzed. When she struggled, critics questioned whether the hype had gone too far. When she succeeded, supporters argued that she deserved even more recognition. That created a constant battle over the narrative. And according to the Operation Balance theory, that battle was supposedly deliberate. Phase 3 was described as emotional isolation. This claim goes much further than ordinary basketball rivalry. Supporters of the theory argue that Clark was intentionally kept away from teammates, excluded from important conversations, and denied the kind of encouragement that normally helps a rookie adjust to professional basketball. Some viral videos have been interpreted as evidence. One widely discussed incident showed Clark on the floor following a hard foul while debate erupted online over the reactions of those around her. Some viewers saw the moment as proof of poor team chemistry. Others interpreted it as something more sinister. But a short video cannot reveal everything happening inside a locker room. We cannot know someone's intentions simply from where they are standing, what direction they are looking, or whether they immediately helped a teammate. Claims that teammates were secretly instructed not to support Clark require actual evidence, and those instructions have not been publicly established. That distinction matters because the next part of the story is even more serious. The alleged fourth phase is psychological breakdown. According to the narrative, the ultimate objective was never simply to make Clark uncomfortable on the basketball court. It was supposedly to make her question herself, question her talent, question her role, question whether she belonged, and eventually, perhaps, question whether she wanted to continue playing at all. It makes for an incredibly dramatic story because it transforms individual basketball incidents into pieces of a four-stage plan: physical pressure first, media pressure second, emotional isolation third, and psychological exhaustion last. Each stage supposedly builds on the previous one. But again, the evidence required to establish such a coordinated campaign has not been publicly demonstrated. There is a major difference between saying that Clark experienced pressure and saying that someone deliberately designed that pressure to break her. The first is obvious. The second requires proof. Clark was entering a league filled with experienced professionals while carrying an extraordinary level of attention. Opponents had every reason to challenge her physically. Defenders wanted to disrupt her rhythm. Veterans had every reason to protect their teams and compete aggressively. Officials were making split-second decisions in an increasingly intense environment. That can produce real frustration without requiring a conspiracy. The same applies to relationships inside a locker room. Professional teams are complicated. Teammates do not always agree. Personalities clash. Players develop different relationships. Some friendships become strong while others remain distant. A rookie may feel uncomfortable while adjusting to a new environment. None of that automatically means the player is being deliberately isolated. Yet the allegations surrounding Clark continued to expand. The theory eventually moved beyond teammates and suggested that officials, commentators, media personalities, and even league-level decision-makers were participating in the same effort. That is where the claims become especially difficult to substantiate. Some critics pointed to officiating decisions involving Clark and argued that she was held to a different standard. They highlighted hard contact that did not result in whistles, while noting that Clark sometimes received technical fouls or other penalties after expressing frustration. These incidents are legitimate subjects for discussion. Officials can make mistakes. Players can be treated inconsistently. The league can review controversial decisions. Fans are entitled to question whether the rules are being enforced properly. But poor officiating and controlled officiating are two very different claims. To establish the latter, we would need evidence showing that referees were instructed to treat Clark differently. That evidence has not been publicly verified. The media portion of the theory presents a similar problem. Some prominent basketball voices have criticized Clark. Others have praised her. Some have argued that the attention surrounding her was excessive. Others have described her arrival as transformative for women's basketball. Those disagreements can feel coordinated when similar opinions appear repeatedly. But similar opinions do not necessarily come from a shared script. Analysts watch the same games. They see the same mistakes. They respond to the same headlines. They discuss the same controversial plays. Naturally, their arguments can begin to sound alike. That does not prove that someone handed them instructions. Names such as Cheryl Swoops have also been pulled into this larger narrative because of comments made about Clark. But criticism from a former star, analyst, or media personality should not automatically be presented as evidence of a secret campaign. People can have strong opinions. They can be wrong. They can change their minds. They can also disagree with one another. That is part of sports. The most dramatic version of the story claims that social media itself was being manipulated. According to the allegation, veteran players supposedly coordinated posts designed to overshadow Clark's highlights, question her toughness, or redirect attention toward established stars. Again, this is a claim that requires documentation. Without verified messages, instructions, or credible reporting, it remains speculation. And this is exactly why the story deserves a more careful examination. There is a real phenomenon underneath all the speculation. Clark's arrival changed the WNBA's media environment. Her games attracted extraordinary attention. Her supporters became highly organized online. Her critics became equally vocal. Every collision generated debate. Every technical foul became a talking point. Every comment from another player could become a headline. That environment can make normal competitive tension appear coordinated. If one player criticizes Clark, it becomes news. If another player makes a physical play against her, it becomes news. If an analyst questions her performance, it becomes news. If a teammate appears frustrated, it becomes news. When enough of these moments accumulate, people naturally begin searching for a common explanation. That is how a narrative like Operation Balance can gain momentum. But a compelling narrative is not the same thing as verified history. The story also overlooks one crucial fact: Clark continued to grow despite the pressure. She did not disappear. She did not fade from public attention. She became one of the most recognizable players in the sport and helped generate unprecedented interest in the league. Whatever challenges she faced, they did not prevent her from establishing herself as a major professional basketball figure. That doesn't mean every criticism of Clark was unfair, nor does it mean every foul against her was justified. It simply means the evidence should be judged carefully. The emotional heart of this story is the idea that someone finally broke the silence. That someone is often described as a legendary figure who offered Clark support when others allegedly would not. A simple gesture, an embrace, a conversation, a word of encouragement, can become powerful when placed inside a larger narrative of isolation. But support does not prove conspiracy. It proves support. And perhaps that is the most important distinction in this entire controversy. There is no question that Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA under extraordinary pressure. There is no question that she encountered intense physical defense. There is no question that officiating, media coverage, and locker room dynamics became subjects of heated debate. What remains unproven is the claim that all of those events were coordinated parts of a secret four-phase operation. Until credible evidence emerges, that allegation should remain exactly what it is, an allegation. The real story is already compelling enough. A young superstar entered a professional league carrying unprecedented expectations. Veteran players tested her. Critics challenged her. Fans defended her. Officials became part of the conversation. The media amplified every controversy. And through it all, Clark kept playing. That is the part that cannot be explained away by rumors. The next chapter will not be decided by anonymous claims or dramatic social media posts. It will be decided by what happens on the court, what credible reporting uncovers, and what the people directly involved are willing to say publicly. Because when the spotlight becomes this intense, the most important question is not what sounds believable. It is what can actually be proven.